Today is everyone's favorite day of year, the 2027 NFL Draft, an opportunity for all 32 teams across the NFL to improve their rosters for the short term and the long term. And for us, what pieces do we need to either get this roster over the hump with Bo Nix or potentially replace Bo Nix? We've certainly got some interesting choices of how we're going to go about this year's draft. It's certainly a fascinating class as well. We went over this group of players in the last episode, which was our draft preview. We went over everything else in the offseason as well, but that included the draft preview where we previewed many of these prospects and talked about where our team stacks up at certain positions. Along with that, in the last episode, we recapped the rest of the playoffs. The Cowboys beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl for a second year in a row. Cooper Kupp retired. We extended Marvin Mims 4 years, $91 million. We accepted the fifth-year option on Bo Nix. We tagged Drew Sanders. We re-signed B.J. Ojulari. And then in free agency, we only ended up signing one player, but it was the best player of the free agency class, Aleem McNeil. 3 years, $99 million, looking to make our already strong run defense and strong defensive line an even bigger strength. I wanted to give him 2 years because I think this team has a 2-year contention window before we have to pay pretty much our entire season 1 draft class along with Bo Nix. But I felt like the only way we were going to get this done is to give him the 3rd year. And when you're chasing a championship, you have to make risks like that. So ultimately, that was the big move that we made. We also traded away Jonathan Cooper to the Minnesota Vikings, acquiring some day 3 draft picks. And we went over a handful of other trades across the league in that last episode as well. So as we go into the draft, I think we're in a good spot because we don't have many clear needs, which means we can be aggressive with trading up or focus on best player available. I think developmental quarterback is an option. I'd like another running back, maybe another receiver. I think offensive tackle is certainly a question mark. I don't want to guarantee Francis Mauigoa a starting spot next year, while Andrew Thomas's future here is very much in question. Defensively, I think we need maybe one more pass rusher as depth, possibly some more depth at linebacker, and then probably a safety. We did let go of Riley Moss. He signed with the Panthers, and we didn't sign a replacement, largely because I like the guys we have on our team, but given the right opportunity, it certainly would not hurt to draft another safety. We had the 26th pick in the first round, and we have all of our picks through day 2, along with 2 5s and 2 6s. We also went through the mock drafts in the last episode as well. Dante Moore, the quarterback out of Oregon, projected number 1 overall. Dylan Raiola is not in this mock draft for some reason, but I think he's going to go number 2. I think the Browns are going to look to move down, add some future assets. As for us at number 26 overall, they have us selecting KJ Sampson, defensive tackle out of Florida State. Good player. I think the value is fine, but we did just pay Aleem McNeil $100 million. If you would like to download the draft class, search in my PSN, and you'll notice all 3 of the draft classes in this series, including the second draft class. I meant to talk about this in a previous video, but I have uploaded the second draft class, even though it's still glitched. I don't think there's an easy fix. Broncos draft 3 should work 100%. If not, then I'm going to be sad. But that draft class should be available to download free of glitches, along with the first draft class as well. I don't know why I uploaded 3 of them, but that's besides the point. So without further ado, let's not waste too much more time, and let's get this show on the road. The 2027 NFL Draft will now officially be open. The Arizona Cardinals, who had one of the worst seasons in recent memory, will be on the clock to get things started. I think number 2 with the Browns will certainly be fascinating to see if they look to move down or if they stick and pick. I can't see them picking a quarterback, even though Cade Klubnik did not have a good rookie year. He was the number 1 pick last year. I can't see them replacing him after just 1 season. And then after the quarterbacks, what happens with the rest of this class? Well, let's find out, shall we? With the first pick of the 2027 NFL Draft, the Arizona Cardinals select Dante Moore, quarterback out of the University of Oregon. No major surprise with the number 1 pick. Dante Moore has been the top projected choice all year, and sure enough, he will be the new franchise quarterback in the desert. The Cardinals only won 2 games last year, so it makes sense to draft a winner. As a junior, Dante Moore won the college football playoff MVP. This year as a senior, he threw 33 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions, 2 of which came in Oregon's opening round playoff loss against Clemson. That game is not going to scare the Cardinals off, given how well he played through Oregon's 4 playoff games as a junior, as he comes in with a 79 overall and hidden development. His ratings across the board look quite good. I think Arizona is going to be really happy with their quarterback. I do wonder what they're going to do with Kyler Murray, though. Can't imagine he's going to stick around. So at number 2, we assume it'll be Dylan Raiola, but the question is, who's going to pick him, because it will not be the Browns. Sure enough, they got plenty of offers. Washington, unhappy with Jaden Daniels' progression, offered to move up 1 spot. However, before agreeing to the trade, the Commanders decided against it because they have a backup plan in Cam Ward, who they got from the Browns in last year's draft. Other teams to offer up deals include the Saints at number 9, the Lions at number 10, even though they won a Super Bowl just a couple of years ago with Jared Goff. But ultimately, it'll be the Miami Dolphins who trade up from number 12 to number 2. The Browns wanted 3 first-round picks in order to get this done, and that is what they will get. Tua Tagovailoa is 29 years old. He's not coming off a good season. He was horrific last year. And even if he was solid, the Dolphins still see the writing on the wall in that they're going to need a high-end quarterback if they want to compete in the AFC. The Dolphins are trading 3 first-round picks, but they've been stockpiling on day 2 draft picks over the past couple of off seasons, trading away guys like Javon Holland and Jalen Wright. Last year, trading Tyreek Hill. So the deal is done. The Dolphins move up to number 2, while the Browns get 3 first-rounders, including number 12. So with the second pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Miami Dolphins select Dylan Raiola, quarterback out of the University of Nebraska. The Dolphins have their new signal caller. Raiola was not originally expected to enter this year's NFL Draft, but changed his mind towards the end of the process, and it worked out for him pretty well. 38 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions as a junior. He comes in as a 77, but only with normal development. The Dolphins were hoping for a big swing on upside, given that their division has Josh Allen with Buffalo and the ascending Jalen Milroe with the Jets. Should be interesting to see how he ultimately develops. And now that brings us to the number 3 pick. I don't think we're going to have another quarterback go for a while, maybe not until the second round. So because of that, we're going to be looking at these guys. How early does Dante Dowdell, the Nebraska running back, go? When do we see the first defensive player off the board? Interesting questions here as we get to Washington. With the 3rd pick, the Washington Commanders select Dante Dowdell, running back out of Nebraska. The Cornhusker backfield goes in the top 3 of this year's draft. You'd think they won more than 9 games last year, but that was not the case. Dante Dowdell won the NCAA rushing title last season with nearly 1,300 yards on the ground on 7 yards per carry and 15 touchdowns. Why is he going so high as a running back? Well, he has the generational measurables. 6'2", 225, runs a 4.3. He can run you over, but he can also run by you. 85 overall, the highest rated player in the draft with hidden development. What a player this young man looks like. And unfortunately, the former Bronco Javonte Williams loses his starting job now. That'll bring us to the Patriots, number 4. They decline Drake May's 5th-year option. And with the 4th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the New England Patriots select Jeremiah Smith, wide receiver out of the Ohio State University. I didn't think Smith was going to go in the top 5, but New England clearly wants to add a true number 1 for Drake May, given that his top target right now is Jalen Polk. Smith, the former generational recruit, didn't really live up to the billing at Ohio State, but still goes number 4 overall. That's how talented he is. This year, he only caught 55 passes, but he did come down with over 1,000 yards. Only a 77 overall. Now, he does have hidden development, but if we scale that rating to an average Madden draft class, that's more like, say, a 73 overall. Maybe a little bit more raw than New England would have hoped, but the upside is definitely there. So with the 5th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Dylan Thieneman, safety out of Purdue. The first defensive player is off the board, and it is a safety. Second straight year we've had a safety go in the top 5. Thieneman can do a little bit of everything. He can cover, he can defend the run, he can line up as a traditional free safety as your center fielder in cover 1. He can line up in the box. He can line up in the nickel. 78 overall, certainly not as generational as, say, Caleb Downs was last year, But it's hard to be too upset with a 78 overall in hidden development. He will replace Antoine Winfield Jr., who was traded away earlier in the offseason to the Chicago Bears. That'll bring up our division rivals, the Las Vegas Raiders, number 6 overall. I feel like it's only a matter of time until this Raider team figures it out. They could be one really good draft away from doing so. So with the 6th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Las Vegas Raiders select C.J. Madden, edge rusher out of the University of Purdue. The top 2 defensive players off the board are a pair of Boilermakers. First, it was Thieneman, number 5, and now his teammate C.J. Madden, who led the NCAA in sacks this year with 21. This young man can flat out get after the quarterback. Really broke out onto the scene this year for the Boilermakers, and given his ratings, I don't think it's going to be a one-year wonder. There are some questions about his size. He's only 230 pounds. You'd like to think he's going to bulk up, but the guy can get after the quarterback. First 6 picks in this year's draft coming from the Big Ten, by the way. With the 7th pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Malik Muhammad, cornerback out of Texas. Muhammad has played a big role for this team over the last few years. We got to see him up close and personal as a sophomore in the college football playoff, where he had a game-winning interception against Cameron Ward. He has continued to be a dominant player with the Longhorns, and I'm surprised he even fell to 7. I thought he was going to go in the top 5. In my opinion, he's the best defensive prospect in the draft. 6 foot, 191. He checks off all the boxes as a corner and is going to come in as an 84 overall. This dude is a stud. The one question with him is, I guess, the overall physical ceiling. Only 6 foot. He's not the fastest, but he is a damn good cover player and will likely be a favorite for the Defensive Rookie of the Year. At pick 8, we've got a trade. The Bengals, looking to add some more juice, presumably defensively, are going to move up 7 spots with the Titans, who are going to acquire 2 3s and a 4. The Titans have drafted really well in the mid-rounds over the past few seasons, so they figure, why not add some more? That'll bring up the Bengals here. They don't normally make big moves in the draft, so with the 8th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Devin Jackson, linebacker out of the University of Oregon. So the Bengals are going to add a linebacker. Devin Jackson is a fascinating player to me. Clearly the Bengals saw how we've been able to use Jeffrey Bossa, and I think they want to do the same with another former Oregon Duck here in Jackson. 6'2", 230 pounds. He's a major threat to blitz. At 14 sacks a year ago. They've used him a little bit differently this year, more off the ball. Only 4.5 sacks, but he's been a good cover player. He can stop the run. He can do it all, but he's only a 75 overall. It looks like the Bengals may have made the wrong choice. He's a jack of all trades, master of none. But in the NFL, you have to have one really good skill, and I'm not sure Jackson has that. That'll bring us to the New Orleans Saints with the number 9 overall pick. They tried to move up for Raiola. Can't see them picking a quarterback here, though. And with the 9th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints select Christian Gray, cornerback out of Notre Dame. The first player from the national champion Fighting Irish is off the board. Christian Gray had an outstanding college football playoff. Of course, most notably, the pick 6 in the national championship game against Maryland. I feel like that was the play that really gave them all the momentum and helped them kickstart their huge run en route to obviously winning that game. 79 overall hidden development. He looks like a beast. Ball skills are really good. Sticky in man coverage. Solid in zone as well. I'm a little surprised he's the second corner off the board, but I felt like throughout this process he was the second best cornerback prospect in the draft. And with that, I think New Orleans is adding a great piece to the defense, especially after trading away Marshawn Lattimore to Buffalo. With the 10th pick now, the Lions are up. They tried to move up for Raiola as well. And with the 10th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Gabe Harris, edge rusher out of the University of Georgia. I am really surprised that Harris went in the top 10. I thought he was going to go more in the range of pick 20 or so. But I don't mind this pick at all. I think Harris is a really intriguing player, an ascending young talent who was able to get a bigger role this year on the Georgia defense and really flourished, finishing with 9 sacks. 6'4", 260. He's got big size, great length, and I think the sky is the limit for him. He's a 78 overall with hidden development. Really good pick there by the Detroit Lions. That'll bring up their division rivals, the Minnesota Vikings, here at number 11. Some good players still on the board here through the top 10. I'm a little surprised Jason Moore is still here. He was projected second in the final mock draft. I think we're going to see a run on linemen on both sides of the ball. No offensive linemen yet. I imagine that'll change pretty soon. And we've got a lot of defensive linemen who likely will go within the next 5 to 10 picks. With the 11th pick, the Minnesota Vikings select linebacker Raylan Wilson out of the University of Georgia. Very talented player, 6'1", 240, freak athlete. He had 14 sacks a year ago, dynamic blitzer. Not as much this year. Defenses did a better job of figuring him out, but the overall skill set is still there, keeping him in the top 11 picks. That'll bring up the Browns. Made the big moves to trade down from 2. They'll have 2 first-rounders in each of the next 2 drafts. And with the 12th pick, the Cleveland Browns select Travion Ford, edge rusher out of the University of Kansas. So our guy is headed to Cleveland. What a senior season for Travion Ford, who built his stock from a day 3 prospect into the 12th overall pick. 23 TFLs, 12.5 sacks. The most disruptive defender in the Big 12 a season ago. Ford took over games for the Jayhawk defense. I'm really excited for him landing in Cleveland, and he'll be playing opposite of a guy named Myles Garrett. I hear he's pretty good. With the 13th pick, the Baltimore Ravens select Calvin Simpson-Hunt, cornerback out of the Ohio State University. The Buckeyes have been churning out first-round defensive backs over the last few years. He's a 79 overall, only with normal development, but he looks like a good player. 6'1", 190, really good in zone coverage, and he'll have a good mentor with the veteran Marlon Humphrey, who I'm now realizing just left for the Commanders. So I take that back. With the 14th pick, we've got a trade. The Jaguars are moving up with the Packers. Jacksonville's seeing all these corners fly off the board. They thought they were going to get one of the top 4 guys at number 22. Clearly not, as they select Daniel Harris out of the University of Georgia. The corners are going earlier than expected. Harris is a 77 overall, only with normal development. I kind of felt like he had the highest upside of all the corners in this draft, given that he's 6'3", runs a 4'3". Only normal development, but it looks like the corners are all going early, and Jacksonville wanted to make sure they could get one. Again, they thought they would land somebody at 22, but the board did not play out the way they had hoped. Moore and Brownlow Dindy are still here. We also have not had any offensive linemen picked. That is certainly fascinating. We'll see what the Titans do here, number 15, as they select defensive tackle Keanu Tanuvasa out of Utah. Okay, now things are really getting fishy. Both Jason Moore and Gabriel Brownlow Dindy were projected way earlier than this at the same position. Tanuvasa is a 79 overall, so it looks like the Titans might have gotten this one right. He had 11 sacks this year, 4 of which came in the season opener against Houston. Credit to the Titans scouting department for not going by the projected rankings, but going with their own scouts and landing a really good player. With the 16th pick, the Carolina Panthers select Eno Etta out of the University of Michigan. This is a very polarizing player to me because coming into the year, he wasn't on anyone's radars, but he had a very productive senior year, 11.5 sacks, has the NFL measurables at 6'5", 295, but there's one major question mark, the medical. And it looks like he might not be able to leap over that hurdle given that he only has an 80 injury rating. A big reason why he comes in is just a 75 overall with normal development. In the 2 playoff games, he was really good. He was very impressive against Kansas, but he could not stay on the field. He did not participate at the Combine either, so clearly teams were scared off of that. Carolina takes the shot, though, as the Niners are going to move up here with the Chargers, sending their first and an early second-round pick away, moving up to number 17 overall. And San Francisco will select the first offensive lineman off the board, Cage Casey out of Boise State. I'm a little bit surprised he's the first one, but I think he's a really, really good player. Trent Williams has retired. The Niners do not have good starters at either of their tackle spots. He's going to come in as an 80 overall with only normal development. I feel like the ceiling is a bit limited with him, but sometimes it's not about making the big flashy move for the wide receiver. Rather, eat your vegetables and pick the offensive tackle. Peyton Bowen goes number 18 overall to the Texans, second safety off the board. I think he'd be getting a lot more hype if not for Dylan Thieneman. The former 5-star is a very versatile player. Like Thieneman, he can line up anywhere on the defense. Up at free safety, in the nickel, in the box, wherever you want. 76 overall, really talented player who I think is going to fit nicely in this Houston defense. As a senior, he had 3 interceptions and a fumble force. Clearly has a knack for the football. The Pittsburgh Steelers at number 19 will select Raymond Pulido, offensive tackle out of Arizona. He's a guy I really liked. I didn't think he was going to fall to our pick, but I was hoping he would. Pulido's a very good player who should be able to shore up the offensive line for the Steelers. Broderick Jones hasn't really worked out. Troy Fautanu is going to need a new contract soon. And Pulido comes in as a 78 overall. He's been the blindside tackle for Noah Fafita over the last few years. Jonas Savaiinaea was drafted in the first round last year by the Giants. He's become a really good player, and the Steelers are hoping another former Arizona tackle will follow suit. Anthony Hill Jr. to the Giants at number 20. A lot of similarities with him and Devin Jackson, who was picked number 8 by the Bengals. Really good player, jack of all trades, master of none. I don't know what his role is going to be in the NFL because he doesn't excel at any one particular thing. He can line up anywhere, and I think his versatility is a major strength. But when that's your biggest strength, that can cause some concerns. I think if the Giants find a way to use him correctly, I think he could be a really good player, but they're going to have to figure that out, and it could be a learning curve. DJ Wesolak out of Oregon State goes here to the Bears. His projection is a lot easier because this young man can flat out go after the quarterback. He only had 4 sacks this year as a senior, and that's because he was game planned around and double-teamed. As a junior, he had 15 sacks, and as a sophomore, he had 9.5. The production has been there in past seasons. Offensive lines have just really put a focus on him. And now that he's not going to be double-teamed every rep in the NFL, I have a feeling he's going to be quite good. 79 overall for the Chicago Bears. The Packers now, they have 3 second-rounders to go along with this pick. I think they're going to be aggressive and look to make some moves as they select Daughtry Richardson out of Florida Atlantic, a guy who was supposed to go a lot earlier than this. Most of the mock drafts prior to the final one had him going 2nd overall. The final mock draft, I think, still had him in the top half of the first round, so the Packers have to feel really happy with this value. I think there's a chance they would have picked him at number 14, even without the trade down. Only a 75, but he does have hidden development. That'll bring up the Atlanta Falcons at 23. They go with Jamari Sharp, cornerback out of Indiana. The other Indiana corner, D'Angelo Pons, led the NCAA in interceptions this year with 8. There's a reason why teams kept throwing him the ball, though. Jamari Sharp is a dynamic cover player who has really good speed, really good athleticism, 6'1", around 185, 190 pounds. He's got the measurables you look for, 79 overall. Only normal development, though, but I think him and A.J. Terrell could be a really fun pairing with each other. The Falcons have drafted really well in the first round in recent years, specifically the reigning Offensive Player of the Year, Trayshawn Holden. They haven't drafted a defensive player in round 1 since A.J. Terrell in 2020, though. Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy out of Texas A&M is finally off the board. I don't know why he fell so late, but the Colts are going to capitalize. I think Indy really wanted a corner in the first round, but since they all fell, they figured, why not go for the value here instead? He's a 78 overall, but he only has normal development. Nonetheless, the Colts add another body up front. I thought their defensive line was not great in their wildcard playoff loss against the Broncos. Brownlow-Dindy only had 5.5 sacks last year, but as a junior, when A&M had all those other really good defensive linemen, he had 8. Similar to Wesolak, since he's not going to be doubled, I think he's going to be very impactful. We've got another trade. I told you the Packers were going to be aggressive. They're moving up 20 spots with the Seahawks, sending away 2 of their second-rounders, along with a 4th to get this done. With the 25th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers select Keldrick Falk, edge rusher out of Auburn. Big riser during the Combine. He was projected to go towards the end of the 2nd round, maybe early 3rd for most of the year. But with a good showing in Indy, he ends up going in the 1st round. Falk only had 3 sacks this year as a senior. Another guy, though, with more production in the past, including 7.5 as a sophomore. He's only a 75 with normal, though. As that brings up the Broncos here at number 26. Jason Moore, still on the board. That shocks me. Along with that, we have our choice of pretty much all the receivers other than Jeremiah Smith. A lot of good defensive linemen on the board. A lot of good offensive linemen, particularly within the interior at guard. We have a lot of choices. Maybe too many choices. And because of that, we're going to move down. The Baltimore Ravens, with the final pick in the 1st round, will be moving up 7 spots with us. So we're going to stay in the 1st round and add a 4th. We don't own a 4th rounder, at least not yet, but now we're going to get pick 101. The Ravens got this selection from Dallas in the Kyle Hamilton deal at the deadline. And with the 26th pick, the Baltimore Ravens select Olas Alinen, guard out of Alabama. He declared for the draft after his redshirt junior season. Alinen could start the run of guards projected to go in the next 15 or so picks. Only a 73 overall, though, with normal. I think the Ravens might be regretting this pick, especially considering they traded up for him. That'll bring up the New York Jets here at number 27. They won a playoff game last year with Jalen Milroe as they select Ola Viega-Ione from Penn State. Another guard off the board, and I don't think he's going to be the last one within the next 10 or so picks. 78 overall with hit, and he looks like a better player than the kid the Ravens drafted. Really strong pick here for the Jets, adding to the offensive line for Jalen Milroe and Breece Hall. The Jets really have positioned themselves to be a strong contender over the foreseeable future. The Rams select Khalil Barnes, safety out of Clemson. I really like this kid. He's a guy I really thought about at number 26 and definitely would have considered at number 32. I think he's the best football player on the board, and whenever we've watched Clemson over the past couple of years, I've raved about this kid. His football instincts and his ball skills are incredible. Played really well in the matchup against UCF with quarterback Ja'Cory Brown, who's probably going to get drafted pretty soon. 7 interceptions over the last 3 years, including one as a junior against Clyde Poole and Kansas. I think Clyde Poole's first career interception, if I'm not mistaken. Through the 3 playoff games, he had 28 tackles, and he comes in as an 80 overall. The only reason why I didn't pick him at number 26 is I didn't want to pick a safety in the first round. I like the guys we have on the roster. Sean Murphy at number 29 goes to the Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman drafting a linebacker in the first round in this economy? I think Sean Murphy could end up being a pretty solid pick for them, though. 76 tackles this year, 4 interceptions, 3 fumble forces, and 4 recoveries. He has a knack for the football, was a turnover machine for the Seminoles. Only normal development, but I think his high IQ and his high instincts will really help him out early in his career. The Chargers select Ty Chan, guard out of Notre Dame. In Chan's career as a starter, he has allowed the same amount of sacks as you and me. 0! And because of that, he is really good. 83 overall. What a pick by the Chargers, who moved down for him, no less. He only played 10 games this year. He missed the first part of the playoff, but he played really well in the semifinal against Clemson and really well in the national championship against Maryland. Just the second Notre Dame player off the board, but again, I think we're going to see a lot within the next few picks. The Lions are going to move up with the Chiefs, trading their second and third. The Lions do have an additional second rounder still in their pocket. The Chiefs, meanwhile, are looking to add to their stash of day 2 picks. They have a lot of guys to pay, and because of that, they want to take as many opportunities to add young replacements as they can. As for the Lions at number 31, they select Ja'Cory Brown, quarterback out of UCF. Third quarterback off the board here in the first round. Brown was the best player in the Big 12 this season, leading UCF to a playoff spot. Granted, he was not very good in the playoff game, picked off twice against Clemson, but he's a dynamic scrambler, one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the nation, and he was very efficient with the football. Only 2 interceptions in the regular season, was awesome in the Big 12 title game against a great Arizona State defense. 76 overall, only with normal development. He'll get his opportunity to start, though, likely for now sitting behind Jared Goff. That brings up the Broncos at number 32, with Jason Moore still on the board. A lot of guys I liked, including Khalil Barnes and the guard Ty Chan off the board, but there is still one guy who I had my eye on who is still here. With the 32nd pick at the 2027 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Tree Babalade, offensive tackle out of the University of South Carolina. The offensive line was a weakness for us last year, and we're looking to address it with this big gentleman. 6'6", nearly 340 pounds. As I've said throughout the prospect profiles, this kid truly lives up to his name. He is built like a tree. As I mentioned earlier with the 49ers pick, sometimes it's not about making the flashy move, but it's about sucking it up, eating your vegetables, and opening up a pair of socks on Christmas. It's not fun, but it's very useful. Babalade is a very technically refined pass protector given his size. He only let up 4 sacks this past season and has really improved in pass pro since he became a starter in 2024. He's a solid run blocker as well. He loves pushing guys into the dirt, coming in with hidden development. I'm not entirely sure what his role will be this year, especially if Andrew Thomas is still on the roster. I think he'll be competing for that right tackle spot with Francis Mauigoa. He comes in as a 76 overall with hidden development. So in terms of rating, a little bit lower than we would have hoped for here at number 32 overall. But given his development trait, it's hard to be too upset with this pick. He really doesn't have many major weaknesses for me, and because of that, I think it's only a matter of time until he does see the field, whether it's Maui Noa as a backup or Andrew Thomas potentially on the move. So that'll wrap up the first round. Certainly exciting. Dante Moore goes number 1. Dylan Raiola acquired with the second pick by the Dolphins in a trade-up. A lot of defense off the board. The corners came off early. Big run late on offensive line and defensive line. As for us, we picked South Carolina tackle Tree Babalade. Again, it wasn't the fun pick, but sometimes you got to suck it up and use the high pick on an offensive lineman. We didn't do that last year, instead trading for Andrew Thomas, and well, we kind of regret it. Jason Moore was the second projected pick in the mock draft. He is still on the board. Jackson Arnold and Malik Murphy headline the list of quarterbacks. I'm curious to see where all those guys end up and when they end up going. Jeremiah Love and Darius Taylor are still here, as is the rest of the receivers other than Jeremiah Smith. We had 2 skill position players go in the entirety of the first round. Number 3 overall and number 4 overall. That's it. Nobody since. And we've got a trade here at number 33. The Philadelphia Eagles are moving up with the Cardinals, and they'll be sending former first-round offensive tackle Wyatt Millam to Arizona. The Eagles just don't really need Millam. They've got a lot of talent already on the offensive line. And lucky for the Cardinals, Millam can play everywhere. He will likely start at center for Arizona, while the Eagles are moving up to the top spot here in the second round. And with the 33rd pick, the Philadelphia Eagles will select running back Jeremiah Love out of the University of Notre Dame. Second running back off the board. Love was really good in the playoff. He finished this year running for 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns. Only a normal development, but he is a 79 overall. Saquon Barkley is a 72. Regression has not been kind to him. He wouldn't be the starter anyway. It would be Will Shipley. But nonetheless, Jeremiah Love is now a Philadelphia Eagle. The Browns select Tyson Ford, another Notre Dame player. And this pick is really funny to me because if you remember in the first round, they drafted Travion Ford. As I've said during the prospect profiles, I'm convinced these two guys are related. They're both from St. Louis. They both look exactly alike. I guess we're probably going to find out if they're related now that they're on the same team, pairing up on the Cleveland Browns defensive line. The Washington Commanders select Howard Sampson, tackle out of North Carolina. The New England Patriots select running back Darius Taylor out of Michigan. Taylor was supposed to win the rushing title, but his groin injury in Week 5 doesn't let that happen. He ran for 124 yards a game this year and over 7 yards per carry after winning the rushing title last year. And as an 80 overall with hidden development, it looks like he's going to be better than Jeremiah Love, despite the fact that he missed most of this year with injury and wasn't overly impressive at the Combine. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Nick Harbor, wide receiver out of Maryland. I know there's a lot of people who wanted to see us pick him. He ends up going early in the second here to the Bucs. Mike Evans retires, so Harbor comes in. 94 speed at 6'5", nearly 240. I do have some questions about his hands. He had 3 drops over the last 2 playoff games, but he also took over against the University of Florida in the first round. 7 catches for 290 yards and 3 touchdowns. Harbor has also played at 3 schools in 3 years. Was at North Carolina last year, and then South Carolina his first 2 seasons. That'll bring up our friends, the Las Vegas Raiders. They select Iopani La'ulu, the center out of the University of Oregon. And the Chargers continue with the run on receivers. They pick TJ Moore, the talented junior from Clemson, who had a great season this year for the Tigers. Nearly 1,000 yards. He had 1,000 as a sophomore. He'll likely start right away, joining forces with Ladd McConkey. Only normal development, though, but a really good player. The Tennessee Titans select another Notre Dame guy, Jaden Greathouse. Went into the playoff as a projected 7th rounder, but he was so good he catapults up to the 2nd round. I thought he was the best player through the college football playoff when you take out positional value and all that. Finished 5th in the NCAA in receptions and 2nd in catches. Alou Ba, guard from Maryland to the Saints. Jurion Dickey, wide receiver out of Oregon, to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think he's very similar to Rashee Rice, who they extended. But Dickey's really good. He was fantastic in the Oregon playoff run a couple years ago. 8 of the first 10 players off the board here in the second round come from the Big Ten. In the first round, it felt like maybe 20 guys were from the Big Ten. The Big Ten is clearly better than the SEC, and it is shown in this year's draft. And Marion Winston, out of Oregon, another one, goes to the Vikings. He was supposed to go in the first round, but saw his stock go down a little bit. The Miami Dolphins select Kamari Ramsey, USC, another Big Ten player. That's 10 here in the second round. The Ravens select Arvell Reese, linebacker out of Ohio State. Reese is described as a football genius by his head coaches, and now the Ravens add to their already phenomenal culture. The Seahawks get Antonio Williams, second Clemson receiver, off the board, and he is a beast. 82 overall with hidden development. Quite the weapon, joining forces with second-year quarterback Avery Johnson. The Seahawks have quite the receiver trio with Williams, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and DK Metcalf. Jason Moore, finally off the board to the Bengals. He was projected to go in the top 10. The mock drafts had him at number 2. So he's a 75 overall with hidden development, so I take it that's why he slipped. Certainly some upside. This kid is a freak athlete, tore up the combine. I thought that when the Bengals were trading up to number 8, he would be the pick, but apparently the real reason why he slipped was the medicals. Some real concerns about his right knee caused him to fall all the way here to the second round. He missed the final portion of the year with a right knee injury. Ryan Yates, the freak athlete safety out of TCU to the Panthers. I thought about him a little bit at the end of the first round. The Chargers select Grayson Maines, center out of Temple, adding to the offensive line. Top 2 centers in this class both end up in our division. Smith Snowden, 4.29 40-yard dash for the cornerback out of Utah. The Texans adding to the secondary. Garrison Madden, linebacker out of USC to the Steelers. Not necessarily a huge name, but I think he's going to be a starter in this league for a decade. Really, really good player with the Trojans as an off-ball linebacker. Landon Dean, edge rusher out of Oklahoma State, goes to the New York Giants, adding another piece to the front 7 with Anthony Hill, who they picked in the first round. The Ravens select Salatoa Mo'ei, guard out of Utah. He's an 80 overall, really, really good player. The Green Bay Packers select Charles Jagusa, tackle out of Notre Dame. His stock went up a ton throughout the college football playoff. Inconsistent regular season, but when the lights shine the brightest, he was fantastic down the stretch. As the Broncos are going to move up here with the Detroit Lions. Only 3 spots. We're going to give up a 5th to do it. There's a guy I really want, and I do not want to risk him falling any farther. Certainly some strong players left on the board. Could this be one of the quarterbacks, Arnold or Murphy? Or will it be another direction here for the Broncos? With the 55th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Mateo Uiagalelei, edge rusher out of the University of Oregon. I know defensive line isn't a huge need for us, but I think this is a really good value pick. And with Landon Dean being snagged by the Giants, I wanted to play it safe and make sure we could land him. Uiagalelei's been a very productive player for the Ducks since he walked onto campus as a true freshman, and someone who I think can play a big role for our defense going forward. He only finished 4th on the team in sacks this year with 5.5, but that's because he was the go-to guy on the defensive line, opening up opportunities for guys like Terrence Green, who's going to get drafted today, Elijah Rushing, who could be a high pick next year, and Amarian Winston, who was picked earlier in the second round by the Vikings. Very productive in the sack department over the last couple of years. 9.5 sacks as a junior, 7 as a sophomore, 40th in true talent. So this looks like really, really good value. 6'5", 270, great size, solid athleticism, wins with power, and is a good run defender. And he will come in with hidden development. Of course, his older brother DJ was on our team as a backup quarterback in year number 2. He's not anymore, unfortunately. Would have been a cool storyline. But he comes in as a 77 overall. Really, really good value here at the end of the second round. The trade-up definitely feels worth it. We've got a lot of guys on that defensive line already, but you can never have too many players rushing after the quarterback. The Indianapolis Colts select Cam Coleman. I wanted to see them add a big-time receiver, and they do so with Coleman, the former 5-star recruit, who's been overshadowed by Perry Thompson at Auburn, a likely first-rounder next year. Zach Rice to Seattle, guard out of UNC, really good combine, another former 5-star. KJ Simpson to the Lions. I'm surprised he fell this far. He really shouldn't have. 8 sacks this year as a junior at Florida State. Tarua Tafiti out of Stanford goes to the Jets. Questionable athletic traits, but the sack production is there. 18.5 this year. Jake Johnson, the top tight end, off the board. He goes to the Seattle Seahawks. They're really focused on adding to this offense with a receiver, a guard, and a tight end here in the second round. Tariq Al-Uqda, linebacker out of Washington State, goes to the Chiefs. The Buffalo Bills, with their first pick of the day, select Jermod McCoy. Corners their number 1 need, even with the trade of Marshawn Lattimore, so that pick makes sense. Talented young man out of the University of Tennessee. Chiefs back on the clock. They pick Antonio McCullough out of Michigan. 15.5 sacks this year, but I don't know if he has NFL measurables. And he only comes in as a 70 overall, a rare Chiefs disaster class, as the Cowboys wrap things up with KD Arnold, the tackle out of Jacksonville State. So there you go for the second round. We only had 2 skill position players go in the first round. That's because we had a lot here, particularly at wide receiver. As for the Broncos, we move up 3 spots, selecting Oregon edge rusher Mateo Uiagalelei. We hold on to our 3rd round pick. We hold on to our newly added 4th round pick. Interestingly, no quarterbacks were picked there in the 2nd round. Guys like Jackson Arnold, Malik Murphy still on the board. Could they end up going here in the 3rd round? They're number 1 and 2 in terms of the projected board. I think we're going to have a run on defensive tackles soon. It's a really deep class, and I think teams have waited to pick them. I wouldn't be surprised at that soon. I think we're going to see a lot of corners off the board as well, and we're still going to have the receiver run. Branson Robinson out of Georgia, the running back, goes to the Cardinals. I think he fits well with their backfield. I think we're going to see a lot of running backs go soon. Lawson Lucky, tight end of the Browns. Brendan Jordan, safety out of Texas Tech, will stay in Texas. 3rd defensive back for the Texans. Mark Nobu Jr., great combine, center out of A&M to the Browns. Tyler Brown to the Bucks. They have a really fun young receiving core with Brown, Nick Harper, and Evan Stewart, who they drafted last year. Malachi Coleman, big physical receiver out of Nebraska, to the Ravens. And then Xavier Jordan, the Heisman Trophy winner, goes to the San Francisco 49ers. He's a 76 with Hidden. Jordan's fascinating because he obviously won the Heisman Trophy, 84 catches, 24 touchdowns. The production is elite. Top 5 pick-esque. But he has like undraftable NFL traits. 5'10", less than 180 pounds. He ran a 4.6 40. So how do you balance the lack of athleticism but the obvious talent and production? Will Helt, defensive end out of Purdue, to the Titans. Kawika Rogers, tackle out of Oregon, to the New Orleans Saints. Dalton Brooks, safety out of Texas Tech, another Red Raiders safety off the board. He goes to the Chiefs. The Vikings, Victorian York, linebacker out of Texas A&M. The Dolphins will add to their young backfield. Trayvon Dunbar, running back out of West Virginia, at over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns this year as a sophomore. DJ Hicks, defensive tackle to the Ravens. Terrence Green, defensive tackle to the Jags, had a great end to his season with Oregon. Malachi Preciado to the Titans. Tennessee is having another A-plus draft. Richard Young, running back to the Panthers. I think Jonathan Brooks could be on the move there. He's on the last year of his deal. D'Angelo Pons led the NCAA in interceptions with 8. He goes to the Niners. Jalen Braxton, corner to the Texans. 4 picks, 4 DBs for Houston. Denzel Boston, wide receiver to the Steelers. Jerry Bledsoe to the Dolphins. That's a really good pick. He is a diamond in the rough. Trevion Williams out of Mississippi State. They had one of the best defenses in the country last year. Jake Gassaway, another diamond in the rough. Linebacker, goes to the Jags. I was hoping we could land him. Dante Balfour, corner out of Charlotte. What is the Texans' obsession with defensive backs? That's now 5 in a row. Mark Fletcher Jr., running back to the Colts. Cooper Flanagan, tight end to the Seahawks. What is Seattle cooking? They've drafted 2 tight ends today after trading for Cole Kmet during free agency. Fascinating. That brings us up here with the 26th pick in the 3rd round. There was a guy I targeted coming into the round. He's still on the board, so this worked out quite well for us. With the 90th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Ryan Williams, wide receiver out of the University of Alabama. The Broncos adding some flash and dash to the offense, and at just 20 years old, the youngest player in the NFL next year will be a member of the Broncos. I wanted to add another dynamic weapon to the offense, and we do so here with Ryan Williams. 6 foot, around 170 pounds. He's got exquisite body control, as you can see there. Really fast. He can win in the short game in the slot. He can win vertically in the outside, and he is a true big play threat. Let's go early this year, back in week 3 against Florida State, where he took this 97-yard run all the way to the crib, the longest run in the NCAA this entire year. Ryan Williams is special with the ball in his hands. I don't know how big of a role he's going to have this season, but the sky is the limit in terms of his upside, and he's got plenty of time to develop. Was outstanding as a sophomore, 931 yards and 11 touchdowns. This year, defenses doubled at him. They blanketed him as much as they could, and because of that, he finished 4th on the team in receiving. He has hidden development, 91 speed, 92 agility, 93 acceleration. He's going to come in as a 74 overall, so certainly a work in progress. Right now, he would be our wide receiver 5. We'll see if that changes with some potential moves. But again, I don't think he's going to be a full-time starter right away, but we're definitely going to try to get him on the field in spurts and hope that he can be a fun, big play threat for us who gets the ball a handful of times per game this year and then eventually becomes a long-term starter. And again, he's got plenty of time to develop at just 20 years old. The New York Jets select Ashton Hayes, running back out of Nevada. Caden Cashin to the Rams, 12.5 sacks. I'm surprised he fell this far. The Eagles get Christian Williams, guard out of Florida. The San Francisco 49ers select Jelani McDonald, safety out of Texas. The Niners are focused on outside production, wide receiver and corner in this draft. Zion Branch to the Chiefs. He's the first of the Branch twins off the board, not Zachariah Branch. And then the Cowboys pick Connor Dunmore, tackle out of Ohio State. The Cowboys addressing offensive tackle with their first 2 picks. So that'll wrap up the third. A lot of receivers off the board, including the Heisman Trophy winner Xavier Jordan. He goes to the 49ers. The Texans drafted 3 defensive backs in this round, and of their 5 picks, all of them play DB. It's weird. I think their secondary is solid as is, but they do have a lot of expiring contracts there, so it makes sense. As for us, we select Ryan Williams, the 20-year-old receiver out of Alabama. And lucky for us, we are soon to pick in the 4th round, number 101 overall. Still no quarterbacks went in the 3rd round. The top 4 projected players on the board all play QB. Got to imagine they're going to go at some point, maybe to the Broncos. I did like the idea of adding a developmental QB. We have a handful of trades, though, going into day 3. With the addition of Xavier Jordan, the Niners will be trading Ricky Pearsall within our division to the Las Vegas Raiders for 2 5s. Pearsall joins Devontae Smith and Jaden Higgins in the Las Vegas receiver room. The Niners are not done, though, with the additions in the secondary. They trade Renardo Green to the Browns for a 5th. Justin Reed will go to the New York Giants for a 5th rounder. Joe Tooney to the Dolphins. Miami looking to add some production on the offensive line for their new quarterback and running back, giving a future 3rd and a 5th to the Chiefs, who are trying to add as many picks as they can. And we're going to be making a move. Troy Franklin to the Cowboys for the final pick in the 4th round and a future 5th. As an Oregon fan, this hurts me. I love me some Troy Franklin. He was a really fun player with the Ducks, and he gave us some good moments in these first 3 seasons, including the divisional round game against the Bills, where I thought he was really impressive. The production's never really been consistent, though. In limited reps as a rookie, his numbers were quite solid, but he really hasn't been able to surpass those as a regular starter over the last 2 years. And with the addition of Ryan Williams, I just don't see a spot for him. Not to mention he's expiring, and I don't really see us paying him this offseason. So Troy Franklin is a Cowboy. We now have 2 picks in the 4th round. Ashawn Shepard out of Mississippi State goes to the Cardinals. Grayson Holton, another defensive lineman, to the Browns. The Commanders pick Kyle Efford, linebacker out of Georgia Tech. And at number 100, the Patriots select Arian Carter, linebacker out of Tennessee. So that brings us here to 101. We got this pick from Baltimore moving down towards the end of the 1st round. I wanted to add a 4th. Now we have 2. All these quarterbacks still on the board. Only 1 QB has been picked since number 2 overall. That's pretty crazy. What's the move going to be here into early day 3 for the Broncos? With the 101st pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select C.J. Allen, linebacker out of the University of Georgia. Linebacker's not a need for us with Drew Sanders and Jeffrey Bossa, but I really wanted to add depth here. Sanders' future is uncertain playing on the franchise tag, and Bossa, who was great last year, only has 2 seasons left on his deal. Allen's a guy I've been eyeing up, and I think he's going to be our choice here in the 4th round. He's a very well-rounded player, 6'1", 235 pounds, solid athlete. I think he's really solid in the run game, and he's quite good in coverage. Georgia had a few linebackers go really early this year. Gabe Harris at number 10, Raylan Wilson at number 11. I would argue Allen was more consistent than both of them, even if the upside is severely less, as he's going to come in with only normal development. The athletic traits don't pop off the page, only 81 speed. But he does have 89 acceleration, 86 agility. And knock on wood, if something were to happen to either Drew Sanders or Jeffrey Bossa, I would feel okay with C.J. Allen coming in there and getting some reps, as he's a 74 overall. Again, not as good as his Georgia counterparts. Raylan Wilson and Gabe Harris both have NFL traits and NFL size, and those guys are going to be great in the NFC North. But I think C.J. Allen's going to be a good pro as well. Led the talented Georgia defense in tackles with 81. Missed some time a year ago with an injury, but that seems to be all cleared up. The Raiders select Christian Miller, another Georgia player, defensive end. M.J. Morris, quarterback out of Maryland. Whoa! He goes to the Giants, where he looks like a pretty good player. 78 with hidden. Now, he is 25 years old, which certainly limits his upside. I'm curious what the Giants' initial thoughts are here. They drafted Malachi Nelson in the 1st round last year. They signed Baker Mayfield. But M.J. Morris could end up being their long-term quarterback. Morris was ridiculously good this year, 4,700 yards, 50 touchdowns. He was not good in the national championship. He was picked off twice, but he was unbelievable in the 3 games before that. Hunter Whitenack, guard out of Illinois, goes to the Titans. Everett Rosaw Jr., linebacker, to New Orleans. Jakeem Jackson, 78 overall corner out of Florida. And his teammate in the Florida secondary, Jordan Castle, is the very next pick to Minnesota. Cam Franklin to the Ravens. He's raw, but the ceiling with him is really impressive to me. Andre Roy, tackle out of Clemson, to the Vikings. And then Max Brown, quarterback out of Charlotte, to the Seattle Seahawks. I think he has a high floor as a long-term backup behind Avery Johnson. Seattle's only drafted offense so far. They're clearly committed to that side of the ball. Brown obviously had a great season, finished as a Heisman contender, led Charlotte to the playoff where he was quite good in their loss against Maryland and MJ Morris. Isaac Smith, safety, to the Titans. Braylon Lovelace, linebacker, goes to the Carolina Panthers. Jackson Arnold, finally off the board. He was supposed to be the fourth quarterback overall. Instead, he's the fourth quarterback here in the fourth round. 74 with normal. It looks like the NFL got it right that he's not a franchise quarterback, but I like this pick a lot for the Chargers. Justin Herbert got injured against us, and Seth Hennigan torched our defense for a half. But in the 3 games following, Hennigan really struggled. The Chargers lost all those games, and if Herbert was healthy, they probably would have made the playoffs. So this gives them a much more capable backup who, again, if something were to happen to Herbert, they'll feel okay. Tight end Donovan Green to the Texans, finally not a defensive back. His stock slipped, but the NFL got it wrong with him. He's a 78. Caden Green, guard to the Steelers. C.J. Baxter, running back to the Giants, missed last year with an injury. Looked good at the Combine, though. He looked healthy. Jalen Raynor, quarterback to the Bears, and then another quarterback, Noah Fifita, out of Arizona, to the Jags. Very similar to Dylan Gabriel. Really accurate, really high floor, but the traits are not there. I don't think he's going to be a long-term starter. Samuel Omoshiko to the Falcons. His other Oklahoma off-ball linebacker teammate, Kip Lewis, goes to the Browns. Drew Bobo to the Bears. Isaiah Augustave to the Bucks. I had my eye on him. Ahmad Moten to the Colts. Indy's had a nice draft. I think they've made out really well. Devon Mitchell, tight end to the Washington Commanders. Chase Beastonitis, tackle out of Texas A&M, to the Chiefs. New Orleans gets Jaden Marshall. I thought coming into the year he could be a first-rounder, but the production was inconsistent. Ends up in the 4th. And then Zachariah Branch goes to the Chiefs. This is funny because in the 3rd round, they drafted Zion Branch. And when they originally picked him, I figured there's no shot the Twins are going to be reunited. The Chiefs are loaded in the receiver room. They drafted Jurian Dickey. So in that sense, this pick doesn't really make sense. But it's so much fun! The Branch twins are reunited. The Chiefs add another vertical threat to the passing game. How many good receivers do they need? Are they planning on maybe moving off of Xavier Worthy? That could be a possibility here with the addition of Branch. I'm not really sure what the plan is, but it is the Chiefs. You kind of have to trust them, and they are picking a good player with Zachariah Branch, former 5-star recruit who's been really good in some high-octane USC passing offenses. The Broncos up here at the final pick in the 4th round now. We got this pick from Dallas a moment ago for Troy Franklin. What's the play here for the Broncos? Do they look to add another piece defensively, or do they go back on the offense? With the 128th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Demon Clowney, edge rusher out of the University of Charlotte. So another pass rusher joins the fold. Defensive line is not a need for us, but again, you can never have too many going after the quarterback, and the value with Uiagalelei in the 2nd and now Clowney in the 4th is too much to pass up in my opinion. Another guy who has great size, 6'4", 250. He wins with finesse. He wins with power. He can stop the run. Very well-rounded player, and I think with his athletic traits, there's no reason to think he won't be a really good player at the next level. 10.5 sacks as a sophomore. Only played in 7 games last year due to an injury, but came back this year with 9. Played well for Charlotte down the stretch this year. He was quiet in their lone playoff game against Maryland, though, as their defense allowed 52 points. Hidden development, and it looks like the value here is really good. I think we landed a demon in more ways than one. He ends up as a 76 overall, so given his rating and his development, that's the same as our 1st-round pick, Tree Babalade. So a really good pick here at the end of the 4th round for the Denver Broncos. This pass rush might be too deep. I don't know how we're going to put all these guys on the field, but we're going to try. So indeed, a lot of quarterbacks went in the 4th round, most notably MJ Morris going to the New York Giants, 78 overall hidden development. As for us, we doubled down on front 7. C.J. Allen, linebacker, and Demon Clowney, edge rusher, both giving us some more pieces to work with defensively, adding some more depth. I think the front 7's really good, but I feel like we could use a few more bodies, and I think both of those guys certainly could do that for us. Now in the 5th round, the Cardinals select Jacob Hood, offensive tackle out of Nebraska. Trevon Bowe, guard out of South Carolina to the 49ers. The Commanders pick Brady Small, center out of Army. A lot of linemen so far. The Niners pick another receiver, Carnell Tate out of Ohio State. I'm surprised he fell this far. Jordan Seaton, tackle out of Colorado. Very toolsy player. The production's never really been there for the former 5-star. Roderick Pleasant, sub-4 340-yard dash. The Niners continuing to only pick receivers and DBs. Parker Jenkins, running back to the Bills. That's a really good pick. Chapman Lewis, safety out of Texas Tech to the Bengals. Jonathan Fitzgerald, safety out of Richmond to the Saints. Sabor Kareem, safety out of Illinois to the Lions. Now we've got to run on safeties. TJ Dudley, a linebacker, goes to Detroit. Luke Montgomery, guard out of Ohio State to the Chiefs. Luke Haas, a tight end out of Arkansas, goes to the Ravens, looking to add some more depth there. Kelby Collins, edge rusher, Florida. That's a nice pick. He ends up with the Rams. Joey Tenona, guard out of Purdue to the Bengals. A lot of Purdue guys in this draft. It's no secret they had a good season. Tony Rojas to the Panthers. Alvin Ebosele to the Los Angeles Chargers. The Falcons pick Chance Rucker. What a pick this is. 76 overall. I think he has a really good development trait as well. Tanyan Zachary out of Tulsa to the Steelers. Zion Turner, quarterback, Miami, to the Chiefs. Christian Ford, safety out of Arkansas, to the Bucs. Declared after only playing 4 games this year due to an injury. I think he should have stayed in school. Lee Beebe, running back to the Packers. Jerry Mixon, linebacker, Oregon to the Falcons, the younger cousin of Joe Mixon. Amari Thomas, wide receiver, UAB to the Colts. He's kind of a wide receiver running back hybrid, very much like Deebo Samuel, and he's a 78 overall. Really good player. We got to see him and Lee Beebe Jr. up close and personal against UAB. I thought they both played well against us, as the Bears picked Taron Tayo, offensive lineman out of Ball State. And that brings the Broncos up here towards the end of the 5th round. Again, there was a guy I wanted going into the round. He's still here, so I think we're going to roll with him. Malik Murphy from Duke still on the board. A lot of receivers, including the NCAA's leading receiver, Braylon Wisloski. With the 154th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select L.J. Martin, running back out of Texas A&M. Adding to the backfield with Martin, who was supposed to go in the 3rd round. I'm really surprised he fell this far, but we are not complaining. 6'1", 230. He is a traditional physical power back who I think can be a short yardage guy, taking some reps from Ashton Genty. We were first familiar with him as a sophomore at BYU. Look at this run. Contact balance was ridiculous there. He played really well in that game. Our only loss in that regular season. After his sophomore year at BYU, he transferred to Texas A&M, a move I don't think he should have made. Did not play much as a junior. Was not supposed to be the starter this year, but with an injury to their starter, Amari Daniels, he took the starter job and was pretty solid. 13 touchdowns this year as a senior. He also had 13 as a sophomore. So this is someone who's really good in the red zone. Again, traditional short yardage guy, not necessarily a home run hitter, not necessarily elite launch speed, but he's tough, he's physical, and he can run through your face. He offered a little bit through the passing game this year, so that's certainly valuable. 173 in true value. I guess that's why he ended up slipping. Unfortunately, he only has normal development, but I think he could be a nice addition for the backfield. We haven't brought back Zamir White and Harrison Whaley yet. I would still certainly potentially look to, but maybe not with the addition of L.J. Martin. He's a 72 overall. I certainly don't think he's ever going to be an RB1 in the NFL, but I think, again, as a short yardage, change of pace guy who gets 4, 5, 6 carries a game, not a bad pick. Here for the 5th round, we're going for floor here. We don't necessarily need a starter at the position, but I think Martin could be a pretty solid player in the NFL. Rounding out the 5th round now, Owen Pee-wee to the Jets, 76 overall, really good player. All my 6th and 7th round gems are going early. These teams are too smart. Hayden Harlan to the Rams, a Johnny Shepard, quarterback out of Rutgers to the Cardinals. He was abysmal as a junior. A lot better as a senior. The Cardinals saw his rapid improvement and figured there could be some development there. He'll sit behind Dante Moore. Trey Lathan to the Bills, Nate Esther to the Chiefs, and the Cowboys wrap things up with Andrew Savanaia, the tight end out of the University of Nevada. So that'll wrap up the 5th round. Nothing too crazy here. The Broncos select L.J. Martin, the running back out of Texas A&M. Interestingly, there's only been one Kansas player picked. That was Trevion Ford all the way at number 12. Obviously, the Jayhawks did not have a very large senior class, but I would look at corners Brian Dilworth and Caleb Purdy to hopefully be drafted here in the final couple of rounds. Wouldn't be surprised to see either one of them, especially Purdy, go undrafted, though. Into the 6th, Dalen Alexander to the Cardinals. Arizona's picked 2 quarterbacks and 2 running backs. Interesting strategy. Peter Falanico to the Browns, and then we've got a trade. The Broncos are moving up 6 spots in the 6th round, giving up a 7th and 2029 to do it. A league-shattering trade, but clearly a guy who we think is going to go within the next 8 picks, who I really want. Could it be one of these receivers? Could it be the quarterback? Let's find out. With the 163rd pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Johnel Aguero, defensive back out of the University of Georgia. Obviously, the secondary is a huge strength of ours. We haven't picked one yet until here with Aguero, a former 5-star recruit who's had an up-and-down career at the University of Georgia. But I like his versatility. He can play safety. He can play nickel corner. You may remember him as a sophomore in the college football playoff semifinals with this roughing the punter call in a game where Georgia was up and about to get the ball back. This play ended up giving Michigan a ton of momentum. Obviously, they ended up winning, and unfortunately, they beat Kansas in the national championship. Well, that was Aguero with the penalty. He's cleaned up his act since his sophomore season, but I think Georgia has horribly misused him. They didn't know what to do with him this year as a senior, and because of that, I feel like far inferior players were on the field more consistently than him. He was also banged up throughout this year. That didn't help, but as the primary slot corner last year, he had 3 interceptions. Played well at safety, got a lot of reps there too. Georgia's so deep in the secondary, they didn't know what to do with him. And I think he's going to be a better pro than he was college player, coming in with hidden development. Very excited about that here for the 6th round. I don't know if he competes for the free safety job right away. Savon Revel and Javon McIntyre are 2 guys I already trust. But I think Aguero's got a high ceiling. 71 overall, hidden development. Again, he's quite versatile. Maybe the long-term nickel corner of the future. Chris Abrams-Drain's on the last year of his deal. I think Chris Abrams-Drain's a good player. I wouldn't mind paying him, but he was really bad in the playoff game against Buffalo. Dylan Spencer, linebacker out of Texas Tech to the Patriots. Jeremiah McGill, safety out of UMass, had a really good season. He ends up in Tampa Bay. John Walker, defensive tackle UCF. He was one of the only bright spots for them in their playoff loss. Nate Ritchie, safety out of Utah to the 49ers. Caleb Herring, an undersized edge rusher out of Tennessee, goes to the Tennessee Titans. New Orleans selects Braylon Shelby, linebacker out of USC. A lot of defensive players for the Trojans getting picked. Bo Atkinson, defensive end UNC to Detroit. Cam Robinson, linebacker out of Penn State to the Commanders. The Dolphins get Jordan Knox, guard out of Northwestern. Braden Lee, he's good. 74 overall, only 21 years old, staying in Maryland as the Terp goes to the Ravens. Garrett Oakley from Kansas State to the Packers, and then the Bengals pick Devin Pillen out of Texas. So that brings us here into the 6th round with the 16th pick. Our final selection of the day as of now. Do the Broncos take a flyer on one of these top projected guys or someone lower down the board, such as Johnel Aguero, who we've potentially had our eyes on for some time? With the 176th pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Malik Murphy, quarterback from Duke University. I'll tell you what, I did not come into today expecting to pick Malik Murphy. I was sure he was going to go in the 2nd or 3rd round, but he has slipped all the way to the 6th. I think it's worth the flyer. I think there's some upside here. 6'5", 240 pounds. He's got a rocket launcher of an arm. He isn't a great runner, but he can scramble a little bit. The accuracy was at its best this season as a senior, 66%. I think what teams don't like about him is that he has all the talent to be a potential first-round quarterback, but he never consistently showed it. He's also not a winner. 3-year starter at Duke. The most amount of wins he had in a season was 5. He won 12 games in 3 years at Duke. That's not a lot. But he also has played for bad Duke teams where he's had to make up for the deficiencies of a lot of the guys around him. Unfortunately, he only has normal development, and it did say he was a projected undrafted talent. But I still think there is some physical upside here, and I think having him and Garrett Nussmeier develop behind the scenes certainly wouldn't hurt. Nussmeier, I would think, still is the QB2. Obviously, he played well against the Raiders last year, but I think Malik Murphy has more upside than him. As he'll come in as a 69 overall. Nice. And so that is our final pick of the draft. There isn't really anybody else I really want to move up for. So because of that, I think our draft is going to be done. We moved up and down the board, per usual. Moved down in the 1st round, moved up in the 2nd. Even had a savvy little trade up here in round 6. So let's go through the rest of the draft real quickly. Starting here with round 6, obviously we ended up with 2 players, Johnel Aguero and Malik Murphy. After the Murphy selection, another quarterback went shortly thereafter, Byron Brown to the Houston Texans. And we did have a Jayhawk, Brian Dilworth, the corner who had 6 interceptions, ends up with the Philadelphia Eagles, 76 overall. Looks like a really solid player. Unfortunately, Caleb Purdy, though, did not get drafted as he was not picked in the 7th round. A lot of skill position players here. James Peoples out of Ohio State goes to the Bucs. Spencer Fano, the Kansas tackle, ends up with the Washington Commanders as the 3rd pick in the 7th round. I didn't even mention him earlier. And then Mr. Irrelevant, the final pick, Maryland wide receiver Braylon Wisloski, who led the NCAA in catches and yards, also ran a 4.34 40-yard dash. He ends up with the Dallas Cowboys. So that is your NFL draft. I thought we made out pretty well. Even with all the high ratings, we didn't end up with anyone higher than a 77, unfortunately. So I'm not entirely sure how much immediate impact we'll get from everybody, but we drafted for upside. 5 of the 8 players here with hidden development, including our top 3 picks of Tree Babalade, Mateo Uyunglele, and Ryan Williams. I don't think any of those guys have clear starting spots right away, but certainly some players who with some development I think could be long-term real key guys for this team. Some other notable drafts I want to highlight include the Browns and the Chiefs because they got the family members, or at least what I assume is family members with the Browns. I thought Kansas City did really well overall. They obviously had a lot of picks, and that was their strategy. They want to pick as many players as they can because they know a lot of good players they're not going to be able to pay. The Chargers killed it, trading down for Ty Chan and TJ Moore. What a haul in the 1st and 2nd round. 2 huge pieces for the offense. I thought the Colts did really well. Brownlow Dindy in the 1st round is really solid. Cam Coleman, Mark Fletcher, and Amari Thomas to the receiving corps. The Niners had a lot of picks. They ended up with 2 80-plus players in the 1st round. They drafted 2 receivers, 3 corners, and 2 safeties. So the production on the outside should be quite good. The Lions had a really interesting draft. I was surprised they picked Gabe Harris as high as they did, but I don't have a problem with it. And then Ja'Cory Brown, I think he could very well be a long-term starter. The Ravens, per usual, draft plenty of talent up and down the board. No exception this year. The Seahawks had a fascinating draft. It was offense for them, so much so that they drafted a backup tight end in the 2nd round, a 3rd-string tight end in the 3rd round. Again, they traded for Cole Kmet in the last episode. They picked a backup quarterback, and then they picked a fullback, all before anyone on defense. They didn't pick a single defensive player until the 7th round. The Titans continue to draft really well. The average rating of their top 4 picks was a 78. Once Alex Orji develops, and I think it's a matter of when, not if, with him, the Titans are going to be one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the AFC. I mean, they have drafted remarkably well since the first draft of the series. Before we wrap things up today, I want to take a look at the schedule, see what we'll be working with here in year number 4. Hopefully a lot of primetime games. I thought at one point last year we weren't going to get them, and, well, then we won 5 in a row. Monday Night Football in Week 1. We'll be hosting Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears to start the year. 3 home games to begin the season. We've got the Vikings in Week 2, and then the Jaguars, Sunday Night Football in Week 3. The first time we will have played Jacksonville since they beat us in the playoffs back in Season 2. Then 4 straight road games, followed by a Monday Nighter against the Chargers. Week 10 bye week, Monday night versus the Chiefs, Thursday night versus the Ravens. Why do we have all these hard games on primetime? In Arrowhead, and then we wrap up the year in Cleveland against the Browns. So that'll wrap up this episode. As you guys know, these draft episodes take a whole while to get through, but they're certainly really fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Regular season kicking off in the next episode, Week 1 against the Bears, along with our preseason. And now that we've made it through the offseason here, we can get the season started in the Kansas Dynasty. Week 1 will be tomorrow for the Jayhawks. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Broncos country, let's ride.